When you don't have a specific change lead or a consultant that is supporting your organization with change, transformation, a transition of sorts, it often becomes really key to understand how to allocate talent to the change agenda. So that's a conversation we're going to have today. Today, I am going to equip you with 3 key roles that you need to have occupied or need to be filled by certain members of your team to make sure that your change is successful. Out of all of the different people you can have on your team, if you can have these 3 key people, you are off to the races. Welcome to this episode of the UnLearners podcast with myself, Zanele Njapa, the Unlearning Lady. The UnLearners. Learn, change. Learn, change. The UnLearners. The UnLearners. The UnLearners. The UnLearners. Learn, change, grow. Now, this episode is intended to be brief. Don't hold me to that. Let's see how we go. But I really did want to just make sure that if you are in a position where you're thinking, okay, now we are in the space, we are going through a transition, a transformation as a team, but I really want to see how I can allocate various roles. I can allocate key talent to certain very important agendas in driving change, because you, either as an HR professional, as someone who is in charge of maybe the comms department in your organization or function, really maybe have been tasked with the change agenda. And I actually had a fascinating conversation not too long ago with a government department that was sharing with me just how much of a pickle they are in because of the need for change management support. But on the other side of that, how they, as the comms department within this particular part of government, was really being called to take on the role of change management. So it was they're in a situation where they're really learning to think on their feet, to adopt strategies on the go, to really respond to something that's quite new for them within the space that they're in. So I thought that was really interesting, but it also helped me to come to terms with just how popular that is, how so many HR professionals, how so many individuals in the comms space and in a few different parts of the organization, sometimes even L&D, is really being called to play the role of change manager amidst everything else that they're doing. So if that's you at the moment, you are almost needing to double role play, or there's a case of scope creep in your organization at the moment, this is an episode you're going to find fairly, or actually extremely valuable, because it will help you understand how to really be specific, how to be intentional, how to be strategic about the key roles that will drive the success for change. Now, one thing I do want to say before I go into the roles, and I won't spend too much time on this episode, like I said earlier, but one thing that I do want to just emphasize here is what you might find yourself doing is you might find yourself pulling from existing team members rather than hiring out for these roles, because depending obviously on budgets, depending on what your strategic plan as an organization or what your talent pool and capacity looks like at this stage, you may end up either bringing someone in for these 3 key roles, or you may have to most probably have someone who already occupies a certain space in the organization, already has a role, but you might find 1 or 2 people really doubling up in order to ensure that this role is filled. The good news on that front is that with some of these roles, or possibly even with all 3 of them, they don't need an individual to just be focused specifically in this role, because they are not necessarily change manager per se roles. And what I mean by that is that they are not the role of someone like, for example, someone you would get from the UnLearners or myself, who would come in and really support the entire strategic process of managing the change. These are roles that are very internal. These are roles that would, in essence, support the individual who would come in as the consultant or the change lead or the transformation lead in that context. So you'll see just how these roles can be doubled up by people who are already within the day-to-day running of the business and within the organization on the operational floor, really getting things done where the rubber hits the road. So they also are, and this is the final thing I'll say, they also are roles that are very fluid on in the day to day. So as individuals work within these roles, they can double up, as in have more than one individual playing these different roles, but they really are key to the success of your change. And we'll go through each one and I'll tell you what it is, but what it can look like. And you can play around as you start to think about whatever your process is. Almost use these 3 roles as a checklist for yourself to say, okay, do I have this individual? Do I have people playing this role? Do I have people playing that role? And if I do have people playing that role, are they playing that role in a way that gives the results or supports the change effectively? Is it still yielding the results? Or is it yielding the results at all that we are looking to get out of this transformation that the organization is going through? So those are some things to keep in mind as we go through the list. Now, before we go through what the 3 key roles for a successful change are, I really just want to spotlight the local choice today. So this was a beautiful review from Rochelle Campbell. We might have read this one before, but I thought I would highlight it today because the local choice is an organization we have worked with, a pharmacy chain that we have worked with, and they really gave a beautiful review to us saying that our presence and wise words really help to magnify their cause in the best possible way. And they say our conference was a huge success, all thanks to your enlightening words that inspired so many delegates to switch, shift, and shuffle. Thank you again. Thank you very much to the local choice for trusting us with your function, with your conference, and to add some value as the team was growing, transforming, and really thinking about the next phase, the next stage of what pharmacy chains could look like and what the potential is in this space particularly. So it was such a pleasure working with you, and thank you for that fantastic review. So if you haven't heard from your organization and you've worked with us before, hang on tight. The review that you have shared with us might be coming up in the next episode. Okay, cool. So let's go into those 3 key roles then. And like I said earlier on, I will share what the role is, and then we'll look at how it might look in practice, and then 1 or 2 key things that are needed to really make sure that this role yields as much of a return in terms of value that you invest, obviously, in this individual. And I want to just say here as well that because some of these roles are individuals who are particularly already in the organization and very operational, you really want to make sure that you think about something that allows your team and your talent to not be overwhelmed by this additional role. And I've seen this happen time and time again where this becomes an additional role because, let's say, for example, with the second one, your change sponsors are people who already are so bogged down or already have these full schedules. And now because of how you've designed the role, they are now feeling completely overwhelmed by this additional role. It feels like something that they need to additionally be paid for, or additionally be compensated for, which I'm not saying they shouldn't, and that's something we will chat about. But you really want to design it so that it feels like these individuals are contributing to something that is valuable for them. And this is another conversation that we can have offline if you really want to chat about it, because this is something that makes a huge difference. Research shows consistently that you and I want to feel like there is an equal value exchange. So as people dedicate their time and resources to these key roles, you really want to find a remuneration structure that works well. I often say that you really want to think about both extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and reward here. So play around with the two and see what feels best, but never skip on that intrinsic, because really it is about what a person feels within themselves that really drives some of that buy-in that you really need when it comes to these 3 key roles. All right, role number 1 is the change ambassador or the change champions. This is probably my favorite one, and that's possibly why I started with it, but definitely my favorite one. Most of us are quite familiar, or at least some of us are quite familiar with what a change ambassador or champion is. A change champion or ambassador is the individual within the organization, or individuals within the organization, if there's more than one, who become almost like a billboard for the change. These are the individuals who will take on the role of not just exemplifying what the change and transformation looks like, or what the new system looks like when we use it, or the approach or the perspective that we want to adopt, but these are also the individuals, and this is the difference between the sponsor and the ambassador, the way that we teach it. These are the individuals who will actively garner support within the organization for it. So they may do it in a range of different ways. They might lead some of our forums. There might be the people that individuals can consult with if they feel like there is, they do have one or two qualms around the change, and there is a bit of a not seeing eye to eye here and there. Your change ambassadors and champions will also be individuals who work fairly closely with whoever the change lead, change manager is that you are working with, because they almost become the hands and eyes of the change lead or transformation lead that is within, that either works outside, so is externally sourced, or within the organization. So that's the role that your change ambassadors, champions will play. Really just the billboard of the change, really just the individuals who are, when someone wants to go, oh, I wonder what this looks like, I wonder what jumping on board this looks like, they would really be looking at these people. But also these also end up being the people that we trust when we want to talk about how hard everything is, or how tricky it is to adopt this, or possibly even the areas where it's not working. These are the individuals that will lead that conversation. So I would like to invite you to connect with us. Go over to our email address, hey@theunlearners.com, and really let us know what you are doing as an organization when it comes to ambassadors and champions. Do you agree with the interpretation that we use around these? Are you using a different interpretation? But also, how do you structure who your ambassadors and champions are, and how they work and how they engage with your team? It will be really interesting to do that. That is one of the key conversations that we do end up having in our Navigating Transitions Mastermind course. If you're not signed up for that, do definitely go over to theunlearners.com, and that is our community, in essence, of change and transformation leads who want to adopt a clear framework for doing change management when they are not certified change managers. So how do you adopt a process that really helps you do change and supporting your team really easy? And that's a brilliant community and course that you can sign up for. If you go over to theunlearners.com, and you'll see right on the top right-hand corner, there's a sign there that says, or a button there that says, join the mastermind. Join our mastermind, and we would love to have you. So that's the first one, change ambassadors, change champions. Let us know how you do that. What does it look like in your organization? How are you executing it? But also, what are the results that you've seen or monitored or measured around having a change ambassador? Are you finding that it isn't necessarily yielding the results that you would like? Is it slow to uptake? Are the team actually warming up to the ambassadors? Because that also becomes one of the things that we often have to manage, is how well does a team respond to the ambassadors, champions? How often do we then have to rotate? What is the value really of having that individual? Okay, so that's the first one. And then the second one we're going to go into now is very similar. And I often think that there is a possible overlap here, because the second role is your change sponsor, or your change sponsors, if you are going to have more than one in that case. So the change sponsor then, and this is really, for me, such a key distinction to make. And this is probably the main distinction that is between your change champion or ambassador and your change sponsor. I want to just take it back to that keyword sponsor. When you think about a sponsor within an organization, especially when it comes to professional or career development, we're talking about someone who has a level of influence that can support career growth for an individual. So for yourself, if you're thinking about someone maybe right at the beginning of your career who was your sponsor, this means this was the individual who sat in the rooms or had access to the rooms and the conversations and was privy to them that you didn't have access to or were not privy to at the time. And because of that, they could then influence whatever decisions needed to be made, or they could influence whatever changes need to happen, or whatever progress you wanted to make in your career. So that's the key word, at least how we define it and how I see it when it comes to sponsors. When it comes to this context, then bringing it all the way back to defining change sponsors, your change sponsor becomes the individuals within your organization who really stand in a position of great influence, great authority, great power. And I mean, this is a very weird one because we find that there are a lot of different feelings around this. When we say great influence, great power, great authority, we often go, oh, no, 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 no. But really, we're talking about people who have decision-making power, people who can drive the agenda towards completion in the organization. That might mean a range of different things. And one of the things that could mean, this is probably one of the key ones, is that this person sits in a position within the organization where they don't have to consult too many people to make a decision. So there is some level of veto power. We could be talking about someone in the C-suite, for example. We could be talking about someone at board level, for example. We could even be speaking about someone here who is at senior leadership level. That means it's an individual with a level of influence that is above or is more refined than possibly someone in middle management or someone who sits in a different part of the organization. That is not to say anyone is less important, and that is definitely not my view, but it is to say that when it comes to making certain decisions, certain voices, because of the way an organization is structured, do tend to have more influence than others. And that's according to organizational design and a few other things that are relevant in that context. Now, with the change sponsor, and this is probably the most important thing to understand here, the change sponsor becomes the individuals within those positions of power who support the change and the transformation and can then speak and rally on behalf of it. Here's something that we see often, and this often breaks my heart. There are so many organizations who are trying to transform and trying to change, but because they don't have change sponsors, that change will fall flat. Because when senior leadership gets a whim of just what our transformational strategy is, and that we'd like to have 50% of women sitting on the board, or we'd like to have a change in our demographics of some sort within our executive leadership, or whatever it is, they roll their eyes, then that change is doomed. Because if we cannot get change sponsors who have a level of influence to get behind the change, then we're working backwards. Then there is very little progress, if any, that's going to happen. And the funny thing about change sponsors as well is sometimes it's really great to have two. And if you just have two, let's say, for example, out of 10, and I maybe merge both the board and the executive leadership in there, and maybe 10 is a little bit low, but maybe something like a 20 and 2 out of 20, that is an extremely low percentage. But if those individuals sit in seats where they can influence, but also have voices and ways of expressing themselves so that people can understand and change their minds, that's sufficient. But otherwise, if they are not, then it's not sufficient. So the more individuals, and this is what I'm saying, the more individuals who are in a position of great influence and power you can have supporting the agenda, the better. Because when more and more of the leaders that really hold great influence in an organization can all understand the purpose of this change and can rally behind this change so that this becomes a priority for us, then there's a lot more momentum there. There is a lot more support. We can allocate greater resources. We can celebrate when we need to celebrate our milestones. Things just move differently, and you can feel it. You can feel a transformation that is backed by senior leadership, that is backed by influence, that is backed by the board, that is backed by executive leadership, and you can feel one that isn't as well. So your change sponsors are absolutely key. You really, really want to narrow in on this one. If you don't have access to it at the moment in your organization, it might be time to have that conversation. How do we think about this? How do we go about this? What are some of the the perspectives, the behaviors, the habits that are getting in the way of us receiving that 50% or over buy-in for this transformation. Because maybe if we're not getting that high level of buy-in, then maybe this transformation isn't ready. Maybe we're not ready for it. Maybe it isn't time. But also, I think it might be worth finding out why. Why does 60% of our board, why does 60% of our senior leadership not feel like this transformation is worth supporting? Because if that's the case, then we need to go right back to the drawing board, because those are shocking numbers. Those are shocking numbers that shouldn't happen under any circumstance. I mean, they definitely do, and maybe it's time for us to sell the idea of why this is important for the organization and take it from there. So definitely a conversation worth having. And let me know, once again, just like with our change ambassadors that we started off with, how is your organization approaching change sponsors? What is the approach that you are taking to that? But also, what have you found? What have you found to be the process of garnering change sponsors? What difference has it made when more individuals or more leaders with this level of influence, with this level of buy-in, or with this level of leadership have backed your change? What have you found the difference has been with that? But also, maybe you found that you've got really great support from your change sponsors, but still you've needed the other two key roles to come in as well. Okay, so we started off with our change ambassadors / champions, and we've now just wrapped up our change sponsors. The last one that we are going to go into is one that might shock you. Let me just have a sip of water before we go into this one, because it's definitely giving me a bit of a shock as well. And these are our change challenges. You're probably going, what? Excuse me, Zanele, I don't think I heard you. What did you say? Did you just say change challenges? And I did. I definitely did say change challenges. And here's what I mean by change challenges. So you've got your change ambassadors and champions. You've got your change sponsors that sit in positions of influence in the organization. And you feel like you're all set, right? You've probably even got the UnLearners to come in and support your organization, feeling solid, feeling really excited about the future. You've got the human parts of everything covered, and quite a lot of the logistics as well. Good to go. But you really don't have, and this for me is key, you don't have a position of learning, changing, and growing consistently unless you have your change challenges. If you don't have change challenges, we might need to have a conversation. Because it's not because you're doing everything right. I think it might be because you're doing something that can be improved. I won't use the word wrong, because I feel like the word wrong really it cuts our legs from underneath us. So I won't use that word. But what I will say is that if you don't have change challenges, you might need to do a little bit of breaking things. They say if you're not breaking things, then you're not moving fast enough, or you're not doing enough work. If you don't make mistakes, then are you really trying? It's that type of thing. And your change challenges, maybe just to define what that is, your change challenges are the organization's naysayers, are the organization's pushback people. Not because, and this is, I want to be super clear about this, a change challenger isn't the type of person who wants the organization to burn to the ground. No, those people need to leave. I joke, but maybe they do, okay. But your change challengers are the people who ask why. Your change challenges are the people who ask why not. Your change challenges are the individuals who go, I think there's another way. I think we're missing something. Hey, did you have a look at this? Hey, did you see what those people are doing? Wait a minute, I think this is not going to work. Those are the people you can honestly call your change challenges during a transformation, during a transition, during a change. And those people are absolute gold. Because what those individuals do is they call your eyes back to what you might have missed. Because when we focus in on something, our mirror neurons, our reticular activating system all gets activated, and we zone out of everything else. We shut everything else out when we choose what to prioritize. And so because of that, we need our change challenges because they pull our eyes back to what we might be missing. The other thing, though, possibly more important for me, that our change challenges help us with is that our change challenges are the individuals that call us to growth, because they are the people that nudge us towards innovation, towards creativity, because they have said, I don't think this is going to work. And if you've ever had someone say to you, I don't think you can achieve that, I don't think that's going to work, it really upsets you sometimes. It gets you fired up. It gets you going, okay, let's see how we can make it work. And that's the role that change challenges play. Because oftentimes, and what I found is that the change challenges are not the people who want the organization to burn down, but they are the people who are going, I see a leak. And unless we close up this leak and we fix this, then this might not actually work. We might end up losing more than we need to. So the conversation then to be had, and this is probably one of the best way to approach your change challenges, is to have a conversation about what they see. Okay, Nomkosi, that is fantastic. Let's talk about what you're picking up. Can you possibly think of a few different things that we can do as an organization to circumvent that? These are the people you want to have a conversation with, because often they are the people who are picking up the loopholes, who are, yes, sometimes fear-driven, but because they're fear-driven, they're thinking about different scenarios and different things that we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. So it's worth leveraging that and embracing your change challenges rather than saying, how can we find a way to get these people out of the organization? Having said that, though, there are definitely individuals that may not be a fit within the organization because of how they're approaching the change. Maybe they are, as some individuals might say, causing a rot from within the organization outward. Those individuals may need a different conversation, possibly from HR or whoever it is that's relevant. But your change challenges are people that are not just seeing the loopholes, not just seeing the challenge, but are willing to sit down and solution in the face of that challenge. So that's the difference. And I think it's so important to understand that and then leverage those change challenges, work with them, collaborate, co-create with your change challenges from there. Alrighty. So very much like the first two, let me know, how have you dealt or how have you worked with your change challenges in the past or are doing right now? How are you collaborating, co-creating with your change challenge? How is your organization viewing them? How have you approached this in the past? And possibly even how will you approach this based on this podcast episode? So to go over our 3 roles for a successful change one more time, the very first one was your change ambassadors or your change champions. Second role was your change sponsors. And then very last one was your change challenges. 3 very key roles based on the work that we do at the UnLearners, but also what we've identified, what we're reading up, what we're writing consistently for our audiences. If this sounds like something you are really looking to put into practice in your organization, definitely reach out to us at hey@theunlearners.com and we would be keen to work with you, explore what your organizational change and transformation journey looks like at the moment, what you're hoping to achieve, and then how we can get you there in the simplest way possible, in a way that is fun, but also in a way that is sustainable, because we know that transformation and change are quite volatile. And it was interesting. I had an interesting conversation the other day in a radio interview about digital transformation, and the stats around digital transformation show that all the way up to 95% of digital transformations fail. And this is according to data that we get from McKinsey and a few other trusted sources. So if you are in the midst of a digital transformation, but you're doing everything in-house and you are starting to freak out, definitely do reach out to us and let's see how we can make that happen for you. Okay, I will close off there and thank you very much, Unlearner, for your time and for really prioritizing the change and transformation journey in your organization and leading change in a way that is sustainable and supports the people agenda as well. Because one of the things you really want to do is you want to couple some of the technical, logistical parts of your change with some of the human parts. And I think that you can't leave the human behind, because when you do, this is really when your change falls flat on the ground, whatever it looks like, whatever the form of artificial intelligence is that you're focusing in your attention on adopting, then this is definitely one of the conversations to be had. And a key parts of that is these 3 key roles for successful change that we discussed today. It's been myself, Zanele Njapa, the Unlearning Lady, wishing you well, and I will see you on the next episode of the UnLearners podcast. Final reminder, make sure that if you are interested in this process, the way that we work as an organization and supporting your team through change, definitely go over to the unlearners.com and join our Navigating Transitions Mastermind course. It's made up of 4 key modules. That is the framework we use to support organizations that are absolutely fantastic, that we've supported globally, anything from your Coca-Cola to your VW, your Discovery, Hilton, and a few others. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the UnLearners podcast. Bye for now. The UnLearners. Learn, change, grow. Learn, change, grow. The UnLearners. The UnLearners. The UnLearners. Learn, change, grow.